started. So welcome everyone. I am Amy and I am with GrowthZone Association Management Software. And thank you to Cathi Hight for joining us today. We are really pleased that she was able to make this work, and it's just super exciting because we've known Cathi for years and years and years and done a lot of projects with her, but it has been a while, and so welcome back. And Cathi is sharing her screen. So we're just going to go over the usual Zoom housekeeping items. So first of all, we are recording the webinar. Everyone that registered is going to receive the recording whether or not they were able to attend the live presentation. So you can look for that recording in your inbox in the next 24 hours. Sometimes it takes a little while for it to process. And if you don't get it, check your spam folder. Of course, nothing from GrowthZone should ever go in your spam because everything we send is fantastic. But if it's not there, then go ahead and just send us an email at marketing@growthzone.com. CAE credit, live attendees, so people that are with us now are going to attend one CAE credit or receive one CAE credit. We're going to send those certificates via the email address that you used to register. And those should also land in your email box in the next 24 hours. Actually, the certificates won't have your name, but that's an ASAE thing that they've approved it, and that's absolutely fine. So no worries there. And if you do attend and you don't receive that certificate and it's not in your spam, again, let us know, marketing@growthzone.com. Okay, so feel free to interact with one another in the chat panel. And if you want everyone to see your comment, make sure that your settings are set for panelists and attendees. That's the best way to interact. If you do have questions, there's a Q&A panel, and go ahead and enter them in there, and then Cathi and I will see those. And then also, that's a great place to put your questions that we will get to at the end of our presentation here. So we will try to have a Q&A at the end, depending on how much time that we have. If we don't have time to get to everything, we will forward those questions to Cathi, so we can get you answers and help you get started. Let me see here. Hi to our customers. Thank you again for joining us. It is always a pleasure to see customers saying hello in the chat box. And let's see here. So, I'm just looking at, I'm getting distracted with chats. So for those of you that are not familiar with GrowthZone, I encourage you to just go to our webpage, growthzone.com, and right there on the front, there's a place where you can register for an online group demo. It's a no pressure demo, just a way to take a look at what our software can do for membership-based organizations. I'm also going to try to share that link in the chat section. When we release the on-demand version of the webinar to the general public, you're going to be able to find that on our knowledge library that's also on the website. And there's dozens of other helpful resources on there. We really do strive to have a complete library that's geared towards providing information for those that we work with and helping associations and chambers improve their processes and engage with their members. I think I've covered all of that. So let's move on to the reason that you're here. Cathi Hight, also known as the membership guru. She's, I'm sure most of you know her. She's the president of Hight Performance Group, and she helps associations and chambers meet the expectations of their members and to effectively communicate value proposition, which is something that we always need to be fine-tuning. She was a national trainer for ACCE and is an instructor for IOM, and she also worked for the Greater Austin Chamber and the Chamber of Commerce of Hawaii, which I'm sure was fantastic. So in today's presentation, she's going to talk about the forgotten life cycle of membership and overcoming re-recruitment challenges and a lot more. So welcome, Cathi. And we are so glad to have you.
Great. Well, thanks. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm glad we've got a pretty good crowd here today. And I'm sure that this is on your mind about re-recruiting some of the people that you might have lost in the past. So hopefully you'll get some great ideas. Feel free to post questions, as Amy indicated. If I see the question and I can answer it and timing sounds good, I will do so. And if not, we will come back and take a look at the questions towards the top of the hour. So, just a few questions for us as we start to frame the session. So I'm just curious, do you have as many drops as prospects? And my guess is probably more. Is that might be something that you might think about? Which drop members should you target? I have news for you. If you go back and look at how many drop members you have, it will be overwhelming because you probably have thousands. And so then the question is, who do you go after, right? Especially if you have limited resources, it's going to be kind of hard to go after all of them. And then, third question for you to think about is, how do we influence drop members to come back? We had them once, so how do we get them to come back again? So, in this webinar, we're going to talk about four things: the forgotten life cycle of membership, some of the anticipated challenges for winning members back and some strategies to overcome them, and a four-step process to launch a targeted campaign for drop members, and then share with you some elements of what makes for successful campaigns. So let's talk first about the forgotten life cycle of membership. Now, you do see the life cycle of membership. So it does start with acquisition, which is getting those new members, and then integration, engagement, renewal. And I think sometimes there is this one place where these drop members are. And then the question is, where do they show up on this membership life cycle? So think about acquisition. That's all about recruiting new members. Integration of those members, as you know, is very important. You also know that the first year renewal is oftentimes a challenge. So the importance of onboarding new members, and I could give you strategies for all four of these stages within this life cycle. So I'm just going to give you a high level of this right now. And then we think about engagement. We know that engagement is linked to retention, and it's really helping members to get engaged based on their interests and their needs. I think there's always a place within your organization. People just kind of have to find their group, their peers, the place that they feel most welcome. It's kind of impossible for somebody to really take advantage of everything you have to offer. So it's really just helping them to figure out where are the key places that I want to um, really spend my time. And that often changes too over the life cycle of the member. So when you're brand new, you might just hang out in a couple of places, but that may change the longer you're with the organization. And then you've got renewals, right? And that's when you get payment for this cycle to start all over again. And I do think of it as being a continuous cycle. I think it's kind of interesting sometimes when we don't want to provide incentives for renewals, but we want to provide them for getting new members in the door. And sometimes I think that that sets up a precedent in terms of how we think. A sale is a sale is a sale. And to me, getting a member to renew is just as important as getting a new member. And one thing we know over time is that it's actually better to get the existing member to renew than constantly chasing new members. But because of some unexpected things that happen where people don't renew because of company mergers, they close, people move, or people just lose interest, you always have to be in the position to welcome new members. So, where do non renewals fit in, right? So, I'm sure you've got a list of members, especially because of the pandemic. We tried to be compassionate and sensitive to where people were. And so, just like we had to furlough some of our staff, in some ways, we almost temporarily furloughed some of our members, right? So, we deferred their renewals. We gave them 2020 at no cost. And I think 2021 is really going to be interesting to see which of those members that you put on deferment or kind of gave them a grace period, are they actually going to come back and renew? And so where does that show up, right? The other question that comes up all the time is, I have people that have not renewed. Our bylaws say that we keep them on our books for 90 days, but you and I both know that it's more likely to be 120 days. And then you might have somebody who just flat out is no longer a member technically, but they haven't become a new member. So where does that fit in, right? So that's what we're looking at here is this forgotten part of the cycle. So I think drop members in a way are kind of in this limbo area. I know at one chamber that I worked with, they actually kind of had this guideline that if there was a member who had dropped within 90 days, you could not re-recruit that member and get paid a commission for it. So you had executives, sales executives just sort of standing by waiting for day 91 to go out and recruit them. And so technically is that a new member or is that a reinstatement of an existing member? And I think those are things that you're going to have to talk about and decide because there is that fine line. But I think dropped members, especially in the aging report, are kind of in the limbo area, right? They haven't paid to continue that membership. Maybe they haven't responded to you. I hear that all the time. And yet they still get all the member benefits, right? They're still in the directory. You're still letting them register for webinars. You haven't quite cut them off yet. And so here's something for us to think about. When is a member not a member anymore? Where's that fine line where technically it's it's kind of open, right, to re-recruit them once again? So that's something that you have to spend some time thinking about. So I don't blame you if you have this decision and you say, hey, instead of just going after people who don't know us, we should really focus on trying to get some of these members back. Well, here's some pros and cons, things for you to think about. Prospects, right? Those are usually never been members versus dropped members. Who should you go after? Well, pros and cons on both sides. If they've never been members, they don't have any history with you. Whereas your drop members, they do. Hopefully, their history is a positive one and not a negative one, because that can work either way for you. If they've never been members, you don't owe them any kind of apology. If things didn't go right, you're trying to make something up for them. But if you have an existing member whose expectations were not met, are they willing to start all over again with you? Think about it. It's kind of like a relationship, right? Like, should I go back with an ex or should I look for someone new? It's sort of the same dilemma, right? There's water under the bridge, something for us to think about. Your new members they don't know anything about the brand, so they're seeing it for the first time. They kind of have to be educated a little bit about who you are and what you do. And your previous members who are kind of in that limbo spot, they do know about you. Obviously, they knew enough to join the first time, but depending on how engaged they were, they may not have that depth with you in terms of knowing a lot about what you do. Um, and then no previous relationship. Sometimes that's a good thing. Sometimes it's a hard thing. Now we know that it's harder to recruit a brand new customer. Anybody will tell you that it makes more sense to spend our energy on keeping the ones we already courted, we already had an arrangement, money's exchanged hands. And it makes more sense that we want to spend time keeping the people that we've already gone through this sales cycle with, right? New members sometimes are a little harder to reach because you've got to get an email address. You don't know who to contact within a company versus with hopefully a drop member. If they're still around, the contact hopefully is still good and you still maybe have an idea of who's at that company. So there are some advantages when you focus on dropped members than never been members, but at the same time, sometimes it feels like it's easier to start with a clean slate. I think they're both viable, and I think you should work on getting both groups of members. So this 4-step process for a win-back campaign, you have to first stop and you've got to analyze and understand the drops. I always tell people, like if we're working on doing retention, I'll say, well, let's study some of your retention patterns. And by the way, let's also study your recruitment patterns because I'll bet they're connected somehow, right? So we have to spend some time really sort of looking at the data, understanding who those drop members were, why they dropped, what they were like as members, a little bit more about their demographics and their patterns. That's going to help us create this target audience, right? So who do we want to go after? Because I'll bet you don't have enough resources to chase them all. And then you've got to plan the campaign. And then obviously you have to execute on that campaign. So, how many drop members do you have in the database? That would be really interesting for you just to run a report. Everyone who is either marked inactive, dropped, technically not checked off as being an active member, pure drops at this point. Okay. Now I realize you have some of those members that are in limbo. So maybe it's possible that you might include in that search people who have not renewed, right? You don't have a paid renewal for them. Don't be surprised if it's thousands, literally thousands. It can be really overwhelming. So now what do you do with that? Well, first of all, I want you to think about why all of those members dropped in the first place. And I'm sure that you're familiar with a lot of these reasons, right? They'll tell you it's about price, couldn't afford it, it wasn't in our budget. But I got news for you. I really don't think that a lot of things that we don't do anymore are based on price. But yes, you're going to hear that oftentimes. I didn't have time to participate. We always have been selling engagement. You got to come to things, you have to get involved. It's like a gym membership. Well, if I'm not able to do that, and hey, during the pandemic, there wasn't things to go to anyway, then why should I renew, right? So time, participation, all of that says if I can't do it, then it's not a value to me. I'm sure too that you have people who belong to a number of different things and they're reevaluating that. Maybe they belong to 4 or 5 organizations and yours just happens to be on the cutting block. So they let that one go. They obviously thought that something else was more important to them. Maybe they're getting some benefits. They're already getting services from another organization that's duplicated at what you offer. So they're like, they kind of seem the same to me. So maybe I'll pick and choose that way. You hear this all the time. I don't use any of the benefits. And I think sometimes that's a danger of us promoting benefits and promoting events is it sounds like if we use them, they're of value. If we don't use them, then they weren't of value, right? There's a little bit of a disconnect there. Maybe they're able to get things for free. Maybe they're able to get things that are on the website. They find that they're involved someplace else. That happens, right? Things change. Sometimes, they end up parting ways with you because they're on a different path. You hear this sometimes, right? It's a click. I meet the same people. The same people show up for all the networking events. It's always the same people who are in education, or maybe they're not as welcoming. I've heard that sometimes where an ambassadors group or a group of members just seem to be a really, really well-formed group. And they don't seem to be as open to kind of widening that circle and letting other people in. You hear this a lot too, never hear from you. The only time I ever hear from you, it's when you want money. That's kind of shame on us too. Bottom line, don't see the ROI or the value. And I think it's because of all of these other things. In fact, I think that could be the number one reason is they don't see the ROI, the return on investment, or the value. Sometimes you hear this, right? It's hoping to meet people, turn into some leads. That's what I told my boss, and that didn't happen. I hate this one when we hear corporate decision. Sometimes that means that what you're working on doesn't really align with the corporate initiatives or corporate who maybe whoever really writes the check or pays for it really want to see some other benefits that you're not aware of. And that's not producing or happening for whatever reason that is. Sometimes, you know what, this is what I call kind of the 10% of legitimate non-renewals is, you know what, when companies combine or they're not there anymore, that's not anything that could have been renewed. So I think that's kind of what I call a bona fide drop. Sometimes people think they renewed, one hand thinks the other hand did it. Sometimes it ends up going to the wrong place. How many times have they said, well, the invoice went to the CFO, but the CFO is not really actively involved in the organization. And you're talking to your key contact and he's like, I haven't seen an invoice come through. And another reason that sometimes happens is people forget to renew. I saw the email, it got buried. Maybe I didn't get another one and I totally forgot about it. But for whatever the reason, yeah, they forgot. So just imagine that you could pull a dropped list of all of your members. Okay. And just to protect the names of the companies, this was a list that a client of mine pulled. It was a while ago, a few years ago, but I really found this to be such an interesting report because this was actually a lifetime value report that they ran from everybody who dropped. And then what they did was they sorted it by total revenue. That's dues plus other revenue. Because, sometimes a $500 member is really a $5,000 member. So they wanted to do this to consider who they wanted to go after. And it's really interesting because you look at the length of time of tenure. You see somebody who dropped after being a member for 34 years. Wow. But then when you see kind of a new member that really put up a lot of money who didn't hang around, you're thinking, wow, that's really something that we need to think about. This kind of list can help you as you sort of look at who left, how long they've been a member. Maybe you'll pull a report that also includes employee count. Because a lot of times people will ask me, well, who typically doesn't stay? People who have been in business less than 3 years, who have fewer than 5 employees, and who haven't been members longer than 3 years is typically going to be on your drop list. But when you see some of these other ones, you're like scratching your head. Really? They've been a member for so long. What happened? So spending a little bit of time doing research, and I think when they pulled this report, I want to say there was something like 6,000 drops in the database. So it's like, well, maybe we should just focus on, I don't know, top 250, 400. Um, One, because if it's been a while since they dropped, some of those companies may not be around anymore and the key contact may not be there anymore either. So, but it's pretty overwhelming. But that would be a good place to start just to give you some reflection. And then I want you to spend some time analyzing those drops, right? So, what do they have in common in terms of how long they were members? What did they pay in dues on an annual basis? How much engagement did they give you through non dues? But other kinds of engagement, maybe they served on committees. Um, they were involved in your programming, they were previous sponsors. And I want you to sort of look at that and learn a little bit more about some of those drops, especially either by date. So if you want to look at people who dropped more recently versus by total lifetime value. Think about why they belonged in the first place and why they didn't renew. And I know that if you kind of key it down to just a smaller group of members, you probably can pull this additional information about reason for joining and reason for not renewing. I think you want to focus really on members who maybe dropped within the last year. To me, would make the most sense to go after because it's pretty fresh. Hopefully, they're still around, and then 1 to 3 years. I think when things are much older than that, you have some other factors to consider, and they may be a little bit harder to get in front of. So, our second thing you're going to do is you're going to target who the audience is, right? Who do you want for your campaign? Who do you want back? Now, maybe you don't want everybody back. Maybe you just want to go after people who were larger companies, more engaged, larger paid um, dues payers, or they invested more in your non dues. Maybe they're people who were really members over the last 3 years. You think it's more important to go after them. So those are things that you want to think about, right? I would say for sure members who lapsed over the last 6 months, which is usually beyond a reinstatement, which might be 30 days, 45 days, typically around 90 or 120 days, might seem to be first dibs, but not all of them necessarily, right? Then you want to kind of go back a little bit more, think about members who dropped up to 2 years ago. Who are people that you would consider to be a quick win back, right? So somebody in your staff knows them, they have key relationships with some of your board members. So those might be low hanging fruit that you want to go after. Maybe they represent 20% of your highest lifetime value of membership, the report that you ran. Maybe those are people that it makes sense. I mean, do you really want to chase every really small business of one who paid you base dues? I was just talking to a chamber exec the other day, And he's actually a board member who stepped in when the executive director left, and he's overwhelmed. He said, when I look at all these members who have not renewed, and the question is, it's just me. So where do I begin? And I said, I would really focus on highest paying dues, longer term members, people who were more engaged once upon a time. I would kind of take it as a triage. I mean, you don't have a lot of resources. You need a triage approach to really do this. You don't have time to go after everybody. And his new assistant, she's gone for 30 days, do a family thing, and it's just him, right? And he goes, but I got to get the cash flow in. I said, absolutely. So here's some things that will help you to do that. So it's no different than when you're trying to put together a win back campaign. Maybe some of those people on your list is who you really see being a bigger piece of your organization over the next 5 years. Think about millennials, maybe even some Gen Zs, and maybe they just didn't see the fit right away, but you really want to cultivate them because they're going to represent 75% of your next gen investors over the next 10 years. So maybe you want to reach back to them. Maybe you're really focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, and you really need to look as if you're diversifying your membership. And there's some people that you really should reach back and try to get. So, based on all of that, you're going to create your campaign. You're going to plan your campaign. And the first thing you want to start with is messaging, right? And the thing that I will tell you is that you have to have more than just one message. When you think about the fact that people want to engage with your organization for different reasons, maybe they really want to influence the future of the industry or the community or region. They really want to elevate their brand. Maybe they want to grow their business. Maybe they want to advance their career, right? I think there's basically four reasons to be engaged with your organization, primary reasons, not to say there aren't others. And you've got to craft the right value proposition, the right message for the right audience. Don't think you can just get one and do it with everyone. I think that's something for you to think about. And if you've got some demonstrated value for each of those audiences, you can leverage a testimonial, for instance, proof in the concept of what you offer, then you definitely want to showcase that as well. You want to plan for a multi marketing approach. Email is great. It's still probably, I just did a survey for a membership, and we asked them to rank the order of how they want to be communicated. And email is still up there as being the top reason. And if you also look at Marketing General Incorporated's benchmarking report, email is still pretty much favored. And it's definitely favored for your Gen Xers and also for your baby boomers for the most part. But then again, you've got Gen V, which is virtual, and some people don't necessarily appreciate emails. But the point is, you have to do more than just email. Email, absolutely. You want to create an email series campaign of messages that are focused on that, but you also might want to take a look at social media, at LinkedIn, some other sources, and not just rely on email. And hey, there's always the good old fashioned telephone as well, right? You want to also think about personal relationships. Let's say you create a list of 250 members that you want to win back. Then you want to spend some time with your board, with ambassadors, with other people who are pretty well engaged with your organization, and you want to really think about who knows them. You might think about putting some targeted incentives in place, right? What could we offer to make it just, hey, I really want you back, and you've got a gift or something in mind. Automated marketing, if you're using that, digital marketing is definitely a way to go. One, because it tracks who opens. If they don't open, it's got a second email ready to go, a third email ready to go. If they go to the site and they don't renew, there needs to be some way to capture them as well. You know that they got close to the water, but they didn't drink. Who are those people? And then certainly think about having a rejoin landing page. You're not going to direct them back to the place where new members, prospects necessarily go. And you want to be prepared to study the analytics and what is it you're going to be looking for. and tracking. So the thing to keep in mind when you're first reaching out to this group of dropped members is not to make them feel that it's all about rejoining. Rejoin today, right? It sounds like a sales pitch. Hate to say this, but you're going to have to spend a couple of your early messages really focusing on the fact that it's all about them. You care about them. You understand the value they're looking for, and you want to be able to demonstrate the kinds of things that you have that deliver on that value and help them realize the opportunities they're missing. If you come at it from that angle where it feels like it's about them and not about you, then you're probably more likely to get some interest from them. And I'm going to show you an example of the landing page for a rejoin campaign. But of course, this fourth part of what you're working on is you're going to actually come up with a plan, right? In terms of how you're going to execute that plan. And you're going to have to evaluate it and make sure that you tweak it along the way. So, some execution tips to help you with that testing. Maybe before you launch it to all 250 drop members, maybe you just send it to 10 or 20 members. See what happens. What's the open rate like? Does the subject line resonate with people, right? Or not? So it's always good to do a little testing before you kind of do the full thing. You want to make sure too that the contact information is good once you send it out. You want to monitor it. You want to take a look at the click throughs. Where do they go? How long do they stay at the landing page? And then what's that conversion rate? And if you don't think it's working, then make some tweaks or consider this a first pass and decide that you might be wanting to do it again, either with a different group or go back to the same group and maybe do something different. So, spending some time evaluating those outcomes is certainly important. Um, when you do your testing, you can follow something that we call 10-10-80. So, your sample testing, right, could just be 10%. You want to look at the subject lines. You want to see whether or not you should personalize it with their name versus not have their name in the subject line. You want to look at different content. Does it work to have shorter content or a little bit of longer content? Does it make a difference who it comes from? Should it come from the CEO? Would they recognize the board chair? Or does it come from someone that they actually know? Like maybe it's you and you're the one that has that personal relationship. So you want to do some of these checks before you kind of blast it out to everybody else. And I know it sounds like you have to take some extra time, but better to take the extra time than to wish you had done it once you hit send and it's gone and you can't call it and bring it back. So let's take a look at the anatomy of successful campaigns and some things that they have in common. So this was the comeback or win back campaign that was done by American Society of Quality. They focused on 5 reasons to rediscover ASQ because they realized that they didn't want to have different emails for different people. So they just said, these are the top 5 reasons that we think would really resonate with those drop members. Hey, you've been missed. Here are some benefits that they really want to sort of reintroduce them to, but also provide the incentive. And then here's the rejoin, should they click on that link. And again, it's always at the bottom, right? They have some different messages. They talk about leaders and wanting to get those leaders back. And so they did this through an automated email campaign. They also did a direct mail postcard, and they did build a rejoin landing page. So these were just some snippets of things that they did. So they had a couple of different messages. They had this infographic on social media that went out. This was also, this was on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and different places. Again, same messaging, sometimes positioned a little bit differently. This was the postcard that they focused on, right? Saying, we miss you. So you got the front, you've got the back, and I've given you a link where you can kind of go and take a look at what they came up with. Now, How do you think things happen? I think I skipped over this. They actually sent this out to, I think it was about 800 drop members, and they got 200 to come back. That's a pretty good return on the time they put together. So they felt that it was well done. They actually worked with an agency to create this, but I know we have a lot of really savvy marketers here who could easily put together something, but just to kind of give you an idea of what they chose to focus on. So, postcard again here. Yes, the recording is going to go out to you. Um, they also have a copy of the slides. So, if you prefer to have the slides, we can make that happen too. Here's another organization that actually focused on members who lapsed between 3 to 6 months, and they also did the 7 to 24. Um, they really kind of did a focus on continuing education. One thing we know about our association counterparts is they really focus on continuing education. And that's really, really important because a lot of professionals need to have those 40 hours of continuing education credits every year. And if they're not getting it from you, from a conference or your webinars like today, um, there's certainly an opportunity, and they still need to do that. So, focusing on the education component certainly makes a lot of sense if you're an association. And for chambers, if you aren't thinking about that or not doing that, you should. The reality is that, especially for your next gen professionals, ongoing education, a way to sort of advance their careers is very important to them. If you can provide micro credentials, that's important. LinkedIn allows you to post those digital credentials, micro credentials on people's resumes, and 95% of all recruiting happens online. And next gen professionals realize that. So, education is a huge component. And then maybe kind of thinking about what's new. What are some new things that you're offering? What are some things that are coming up? You don't want to miss this. Well, they were able to get back 800 dropped members in 45 days and $64,000 in membership dues. That's nothing to discount at all. So, very successful in terms of their approach and how they did it. Some other winning tips for campaigns. Be really careful about the amount of times that you contact lapsed members. This is not to make them feel as if they're hounded. This is not about doing 20 emails. You have to have a well thought out campaign that might have somewhere between 4 and 7 emails that are have some separation time between them, not too long, but not too close together. And keep in mind that quality of what you're saying in your content is a lot more important than the frequency. Okay. You also have to realize too, and I think I read this somewhere in marketing, that sometimes it takes 7 times for someone to see something before they actually click on a link, which is why oftentimes you will see that multiple times in people's social media feeds, right? Which is why it's important to have that targeted approach, maybe by using pixels or redirected targeting on social media. If somebody responds and they've had a poor experience, please handle that appropriately, apologize, set up a time to talk with them, because maybe it was something you didn't know about. Maybe it was just an oversight. Maybe there was a glitch that happened, but certainly taking responsibility for it is important. Make sure too that how you're directing them in your links and where they're going are relevant resources, things that maybe they forgot are there, things that are really popular with groups of members that are just like them, and not just constantly to the rejoin landing page. So, yes, you do want to have a link there, but you want to have some other links there as well. You might have a board member reach out to them personally to invite them to join a committee or to be a guest for something that's coming up. That might, mean something. Maybe it's just not the same person who's constantly pinging them, but you might even think about having 2 or 3 people sort of be represented in that reach out. And I would say too that if they are gone within the last 6 months, pick up the phone, try to have a conversation with them. I know it's been really hard to reach people, but as people are coming back to the office, I think it's important for you to think about it. And you might try different times of the day. It might be at 7:30 and at 5:30 rather than just in smack in the middle of the day. And a handwritten note, hopefully they're at the same address, is something you could consider as well. Think about members who have a personal relationship with someone and really leverage that relationship. I know when I served on the Member Relations Council at the Austin Chamber, I ran a similar council at the Boulder Chamber in Colorado. We did quite a bit of that outreach on behalf of the chamber because sometimes people are more willing to answer a phone, to respond to an email, to say, I am a member of such and such organization, just as you. And I want to talk to you about your membership. That can go a long way. I've even called members who were lapsed or hadn't renewed yet. And I said, I'm Cathi Hight, and I serve on the Austin Chambers Member Relations Council. And I first want to tell you that this is not a money call. I just really want to talk to you about your membership. I think sometimes there's a sense of relief when they don't feel that it's all about money, that you really care about them, that you want to know what's going on with them. And sometimes you get a better result when you use members to make those calls versus paid staff. Just something to think about. And someone on your board certainly it could be a peer, but certainly is a member as well. And I would recommend, if you're not using an automated email campaign, a very robust system to do that, this is the time to think about it. It's not just for this purpose of doing the win back campaign. You can leverage that for prospecting new members, onboarding new members, also using it to engage and to help you with the renewals. If you've ever signed up for one of my webinars, you'll know that if you don't respond to the first email that you'll get, maybe you'll pay attention. You'll actually get three more that have different subject lines. And if you go to the landing page and you don't register, you're going to get two more emails that say, I noticed you were looking at ABC and decided not to register, or maybe something went wrong. I really want to see how we can help you get registered for this upcoming event. And sometimes they will email me back and apologize or say, well, this came up, and they don't realize it was an automated message. So, of course, that's the other thing to kind of think about. Your automated email messages should sound as if you're having a conversation with people. And it shouldn't sound like it's a canned email that was written and it really sounds like a pitch rather than it's really a personal outreach. So keep that in mind as well. So, we talked about this forgotten life cycle. We're going to be focusing on those dropped members, not quite renewed members, and get them back. But I would also ask that you think about the rest of this cycle, starting with acquisition. And I'm going to tell you the two best strategies to use for each of these stages. For acquisition, you should recruit for retention. If you spend enough time analyzing your data to know who drops and who stays, I would have you consider how you recruit and think about recruiting differently, and make sure that you use value propositions that actually align with the types of prospects you're going after. If you're really going after someone who wants to advance their career, elevate their brand, influence the future of the community, the region, or the industry, or elevate their brand, and you pay attention to what people care about and why they might be a member, then you want to make sure that there's an alignment between what you're marketing and what they're looking for. Integration, that first year time for a member and creating a positive experience for them is so, so important. So make sure that you've got a well thought out, a formal integration or onboarding process or campaign in place, and you use it. Engagement, create meaningful engagement opportunities. Just did a webinar, just did a survey with an organization, and we asked, in terms of which of these things are engaged with that the organization currently offers. But then we asked an open-ended question. Actually, it was a question that allowed for open-ended responses, but we said, how do you define meaningful engagement with us? And it was interesting what people selected. So just because you want them to be engaged, meaningful engagement might mean something really different. They might say, I like focus groups or roundtables, more informal ways where I can get to know people. I'm really not more inclined to go to just networking events that are unstructured. Okay, pay attention to that so that you know how to reach out to them appropriately. And you want to monitor people who are engaged and not engaged and target those who, for whatever reason, aren't engaged. Now, I'm not saying you can have a great member who isn't engaged. You could. You have some people that care about your mission and your initiatives, and they're not looking to be engaged in everything, and they'll tell you that. But it's good that you have the opportunity to talk with them and understand that they're more of a mission based member for you and not necessarily one who's looking for what's in it for me. And for renewals, make it easy, make it convenient. Look at doing automatic renewals, right? Payment options or what I call subscription types of models where there never is a renewal. Netflix, Amazon Prime, my wine club, my my facial club never ask me if I want to renew. They just make my price point attractive. It's perpetual and it continues until I say stop. And when I'm looking at small amounts, up to $50 or $60 a month, I don't usually blink when I see that on my credit card. And hate to tell you this, but when it comes time for renewal, you do have to re-communicate the value of membership. So, our summoner. Here's our summary. We're going to wrap this up. You need to clarify when members are still members or not members. You want to target drop members as great prospects because they already know you. You had a relationship with them once. There's trust. It's time to get that trust and rebuild that relationship. And you're going to use this 4-step process: analyze, target, plan, execute, and keep in mind that prevention is always better than cure, right? So improve the cycle, and hopefully you have fewer members to chase to rejoin. So we'll move into Q&A, Amy, and you'll let us know what kinds of questions we have and see if we can get them answered. And then I'll also leave you with my contact information so you can reach out to me directly. All right.
Awesome. That was fantastic. Very interesting and a lot of good reminders there. All right, so we do have a lot of questions. Anything that we don't get to, we will send those to Cathi for her response. So we will start here. This person, their organization, the membership is free, which can be tricky since members have to technically, they don't have any skin in the game. Do you have any tips or advice to win back members? Most dropped members were newer members who did not have time to see the full value of our services.
Right. So this is all from the same person?
It is.
Okay. So it's kind of hard when membership is free. So if they were a member and they're not a member anymore and they're free, how did they not become a member? I mean, is there something that says they have to renew it? And so it's just a matter of getting them to hit that renew button, even though it's free. So that's one question I have to whoever asked that. And if they do have to reactivate somehow, I think pointing out to them what the benefits are, because they probably forgotten about it. I mean, most of us, maybe kind of saw something early on that made us decide to be a member. But if we're not good about coming back into the member portal or visiting the website, we really don't recall what those benefits are. So again, I think that's why when you looked at ASQ, they really focused on sort of 5 benefits that are the most popular for their members. So certainly reaching back to them. And I think for those who were newbies who didn't have a chance to really use those benefits, I would just target them again. And again, maybe this is the opportunity to invite them to something that they can take advantage of, or give them a new 90-day window if it is a pay type of thing for them to revisit and to get re-engaged. And then you can just, kind of ping them and say, in order to continue receiving these benefits, click here to renew. All right.
Excellent. Yeah, that was a detailed one. Okay. Do you know of a good example of a rejoin landing page for the automated marketing campaign?
Well, you could definitely look at the one that ASQ put together. So they did have a landing page. So when you clicked on either the infographic or there was a link in an email, it went to a rejoin page that had that same information. So it makes someone feel that, oh, wow, this page is just for me, right? This is, and the messaging can be there. And it's really different than if you went to their join page on their website. So it's pretty easy to create a landing page that is just for this particular purpose. And you may have some links to other things that are on their website, but it's really made so that they feel familiar with that. We've done the same thing for onboarding. You know, if they're brand new members, we send them to an onboarding landing page that has links to other places in the website. We're just trying to make it easy for them to put all the information in one place with the right messaging, with the links, and, you know, sort of help them. It's kind of like a guided process. That's the reason why you would do a separate rejoin page. All right. Any
Perfect.
other questions?
A lot. What is a good, which is a great sign. So very exciting. What is a good conversion rate for a win back campaign?
That's a good point. Well, I think it'd be important for you to have a goal, just like you would have a goal for a recruiting campaign, certainly having a goal for a win back campaign. I would think that if you were able to achieve anywhere between 15 and 25% on a campaign, that would be huge, right? And that's the other reason why I think it's important to focus on who you're going after, right? So there could be people that you have the relationship with, or who are your higher paying dues. It's the same thing when I was talking to the executive director that has to go after all these people that haven't renewed. And I said, triage, start from the top investment, work your way down, think about who you know. And I said, you know, does it make more sense for you to get back $1,000 member than a $250 member? I mean, if you think about what your goal is, then you have to also sort of plan your strategy around how are you more likely to achieve that goal.
Goal setting. That is always the first step. And sometimes it's hard to sit down and do that. Well, it is for me sometimes. um, what do you think about testing a multi-year membership for 2 to 3 year signups or for renewals?
I know that there are people that have done that and have found success in it if you can kind of get that early commitment. So there's like just like a slight discount. I've even seen people do that on renewals, especially if they renew early. Sometimes they give a slight discount. I'm not a big fan necessarily of discounts because sometimes you're letting price kind of drive it rather than the value. But you know, if you think that that might work and you want to offer, you know, a 5% discount, because you're talking about this is multiple years. So you're giving that discount for more than just a 1 year membership. I would prefer to give someone something like 3 extra months, you know, on their membership. I'd rather throw in something as an incentive, like a banner ad or, you know, something that doesn't necessarily cost me money than necessarily taking in less money. But that's just my take on it.
That's a great question and a great answer.
Mhm.
Okay, so there was one I don't want to miss anyone.
Yeah.
Um,
I see
after
one.
and
Yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
after initial onboarding, what would you say is a good time frame to then reach out with a personal call or email to check in? And before you answer that, I want to let everybody know that on our resources page, and I will include a link with the recording, we have a complete calendar guide of
Yay.
the onboarding, and it is incredible and detailed. So I will put a link to that on there for your use. And now I'll
Good.
hand it back to Cathi.
Okay. Well, I will tell you that I think most of the time how we treat renewals of any kind, whether it's a first year member or otherwise, I think we start too late in the cycle, right? So most of our energy is spent chasing money after the time to pay has lapsed, right? So we're chasing renewals not, you know, maybe 1 month before and then 90 days after a renewal period. And with first year members, I will tell you that I think it's more important that you focus on the first 90 days and then the next 90 days, that's where your energy should be rather than at the 90-day mark where you're now getting ready to send them the invoice, right? Because what you're looking for is early engagement, early success for them, that they've been able to find the right group, they've been able to use a benefit, that they really feel as if they're getting their needs met, they have their questions answered. So to me, focus really on having multiple touches in the first 90 days. That can be through email, that could be through a call. There's lots of ways of doing it. Monitor that engagement, help them assess where do you want to start? And then just make sure that you're providing that information and checking in with them to see how it's going. And then you're going to probably do a 6-month just check in, evaluation. What do you like so far? What's been your favorite thing? What's something you wanted to do, but you haven't tried yet? So to me, the early engagement from you is most important in this process. So you can certainly look at what has been posted there in terms of ideas, but that's my recommendation. I think you can build all that into your onboarding plan.
Agreed. All right, so I'm going to answer a couple of questions and clear up a few things. And we may have another question here. I just want to make sure we get this in. First of all, the recording is going to be sent out. And when you receive that email, it will also have a link to the slide deck. So all that information will be available. We will, what we're going to do is there's a lot of product questions on here. And so as opposed to diving into those one by one, because people have questions that are fantastic, but all over the place, I will either put a link up to the information or come up with a solution to getting answers to your questions. At first I said, well, we'll just pass this on to somebody, but the number of requests for clarification that have come in have made that probably not as feasible. So the questions and the ideas are important. Keep an
Right.
eye out in the email for getting answers to those. And thank you for asking them. It's always amazing to
Yeah.
see the ideas that our customers have and how they're using the product.
Right.
And then on that note,
I
I
do see
want to,
one question. I do see
yeah,
one question that's from Tony that I'll answer.
yeah,
It says, was the lifetime value report generated from an AMS? Yes, it was. It was a special report that it was a custom report that this organization had paid to have run. But I will tell you what, it's been worth every cent they spent on it because they wanted to have a lifetime value report. And then they chose to use it for dropped members versus active members. And in both instances, great information. First of all, you should know what the lifetime value is of each of your members. But when you're thinking about using that for a win back campaign, that proved to be really helpful as well. So they did pay to have it done. I'm not saying it was really a lot of money, but they used it over and over again. And that was really helpful. So you can also filter, you can kind of look at clusters like small business members, versus larger or different groups. But it's the same report. The only thing that you're choosing is who's included in the filter. So yes, it was an IMS, an AMS, a custom report.
right,
Okay.
right. And we have a thorough workbook on how to calculate membership, how to do membership calculations. And it's a math book written for people who hate math. That was a personal thought of mine. I feel like I have a lot of brothers and sisters in that regard of everyone that hates math. So it's simple to walk through and it does go over customer lifetime value, churn rates, retention rates. That link is also going to be on the page and you can find it in our knowledge library, as well as information on the GrowthZone marketing automation platform. So Cathi has drilled into us that we need to be using marketing automation for
Absolutely.
renewals and retention. And so there will be information as well on that, on how GrowthZone can help you with that.
Yes. And I know someone's looking for the screenshot, the lifetime value report. You're going to get a copy this presentation. You can go back and take a look at it and pause it and see it. This is how you can contact me. I also have a lot of articles and blog posts, something on lifetime value as well. I did an article for ACCE on lifetime value, so you can find that on my website. Feel free to reach out. And Amy will just remind people about things that they can get from GrowthZone. And we'll go ahead and wrap things up since we're here at the top of the hour.
Yeah, and I did put that calculations book in the chat, but it'll also be with the email. And so with that, I think we've sure covered a lot of things today. This has been really helpful, and I just know from the engagement in the chat box and with the Q&A, it was very helpful and beneficial to everyone. So
Good.
again, thank you
You're
for
welcome.
joining us. And to everyone that attended, I thank you and want to make sure that you know you can log on to growthzone.com and sign up for an online group demo. No pressure. Just take a look at what the software can do for you. Look for this recording in your inbox in the next 24 hours. If you have any issues, reach out to us at marketing@growthzone.com. And I think that that's about it. So have a
Great.
fantastic rest of the week. Stay cool if you're somewhere hot. I guess if you're somewhere cold, stay warm. So have a
All
good one,
right.
everybody. Thank you so much, Cathi.
You're welcome. Thanks, Amy, for the invite. Appreciate it. Talk to you guys soon.
Bye-bye.